The sound in the shed. When my grandmother passed away, I was the only one close enough to be entrusted with cleaning out her old house in the countryside. It was a wooden two-story house perched on a hill overlooking a long abandoned rice field. The house had no electricity, only the dim yellow glow of oil lamps and the sound of wind howling through decaying wooden walls. I arrived on a cold, rainy afternoon. The rain seemed to slow time itself, drenching everything in a heavy, musty stillness. As I stepped inside, the mingling scent of mold and lingering incense hit me, sending a shiver down my spine. My grandmother had always been deeply superstitious. The house was filled with prayer beads, carved statues, and constant chanting. Everything remained untouched. But what disturbed me most was the shed out back. I had feared it since childhood. And I still did. That night, I stayed over. Darkness fell thick and heavy, broken only by the croaks of frogs and the whistle of the wind through the cracks in the walls. Half asleep, I was startled awake by a knocking sound, steady and deliberate, coming from the shed. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind rattling loose boards or a tree branch brushing the wall. But the knocking returned, exactly 3 times. With precise pauses, like someone rapping knuckles against rotting wood. Gripping a flashlight, I stepped outside. The rain had stopped, leaving the world slick and silent. As I neared the shed, I heard whispers, the voice of an old woman, murmuring in a language I didn't understand. The shed door was locked tight, but I could feel something watching me from within, its gaze piercing through the cracks. I fled back into the house. I couldn't sleep. In my feverish dreams, I saw my grandmother standing inside the shed, her back to the darkness, long hair hanging down. She turned around, her eyes empty sockets, and her mouth moved silently. "Don't open the door." The next morning, I checked the shed. The rusty padlock was still intact. I had no key and no intention of forcing it open. But then I saw it, a single muddy footprint, barefoot, leading into the shed. The surrounding ground was completely dry. Just one footprint. Just one. I called my mother and told her everything. She was silent for a long time before finally saying, "If you notice anything strange, don't go near the shed. Your grandmother strictly forbade anyone from touching it." "Why?" I asked. "What's inside?" She said, "It was a place to lock away something that must never be named." That second night, things got worse. Around midnight, I heard a child crying, soft sobs drifting from the direction of the shed. I tried to ignore it, buried myself under the blanket. But the crying got closer, until it was right outside my bedroom window. I heard fingernails scraping lightly against the glass, and a child's voice pleading, "Miss, let me in. I'm cold." I looked out. No one was there. But on the window pane, a small, misty handprint had appeared. The next morning, I decided to leave. While packing, I found my grandmother's photo, her altar portrait, shattered on the floor. The glass was cracked, and a long slash had been etched across her face, right through the eyes. My heart pounded. I knew I couldn't stay another night. On my way out, I stopped by Uncle Two's house, my grandmother's only neighbor. When I mentioned the shed, he went pale. "Dear God," he muttered, "it's still there? Your grandma hid it well." He told me a story. Years ago, my grandmother had taken part in an exorcism in the village. A child had gone missing, and when found was in a horrific state. Blind, mouth torn wide, body covered in symbols, and whispering, "The shadow in the shed took me." The villagers blamed a demon they believed had once lived in an old abandoned shed. They sealed it away, trapping it beneath the shed, and locked it using old charms and rituals. "Your grandmother was the last one to hold the key," he said. "She told me if she died without burning all the talismans, no one must open the shed or it'll escape." That night, I returned for the last time. I had to destroy the shed, just as my grandmother would have wanted. I soaked it in gasoline, my hands trembling, and lit a match. As the flames caught, I heard screaming from inside. Not human, not animal. A chorus of howls, something banging and thrashing against the walls. Then I heard a child's voice scream, Don't burn me, I'm still alive." I froze. The fire blazed higher, and I saw it. A face pressed against the slats of wood, bloated, twisted, eyes bulging from their sockets, mouth wide open in an unnatural scream. It wasn't human, and it was staring directly at me. I ran. I don't know what I burned that night. They say the whole house turned to ash, nothing left but soot. But even now I dream of the knocking sound, 3 sharp raps and a whisper that says, "You opened it. Now no one can close it again." The girl in room 313. I was never one to believe in ghosts. As a young man freshly out of university, I took a job at a small, aging hotel on the outskirts of town, mostly to pay rent and get by while figuring out what to do with my life. It wasn't glamorous. The carpets were stained, the wallpaper peeling, and the air always smelled slightly of mildew and something vaguely metallic. But it was quiet, and the guests were few. Most nights, I was the only one on shift. It was my 3rd week when I first heard about room 313. "You don't assign that room," said Maria, the housekeeper, her voice low as if someone else might be listening. "If the system books it automatically, switch it. Just pretend it's under maintenance." "Why?" I asked, half smiling. "Is it haunted?" She looked me dead in the eye. "Just don't open it. Not even to peek." Of course, that only made me more curious. I checked the logs. Room 313 hadn't been occupied in years. No cleaning records, no maintenance reports, nothing. But the door was still there, down the far end of the 3rd floor hallway. I passed it often. It looked like any other door. Slightly worn, brass handle, the number plaque tilted a bit to the left. But I never saw it open. Never saw anyone go in or out. One rainy night, I sat at the front desk alone, the storm thundering outside. The power flickered twice before going out completely. The emergency lights kicked in, bathing everything in a dim red hue. I sighed, grabbed my flashlight, and made the rounds. The 3rd floor was darker than the rest. The hallway stretched unnaturally long, shadows twitching along the walls. As I passed room 313, I heard something. A soft, rhythmic tapping, like fingernails against glass. I stopped. It came again. Tap, tap. I pressed my ear to the door. The sound was definitely coming from inside. Then I heard it, a girl's voice, barely audible, whispering, "Please, help me." My skin went cold. I hesitated only a moment before grabbing the master key. Maybe it was a prank, or someone got trapped. I slid the key in, turned it, and pushed the door open. Inside was darkness, a heavy, thick kind of darkness, as if the room itself didn't want to be seen. I shined my flashlight around. The room was perfectly preserved, unlike the others in the hotel. No dust, no decay. The bed was made, the drapes drawn tight, and on the nightstand sat a porcelain doll with its head tilted unnaturally to the side. Its eyes were fixed on me. Then I saw her. A girl, maybe 9 or 10, in a faded white dress, standing in the corner with her face turned to the wall. Her hair hung down in tangled ropes. She didn't move. "Hey," I said gently. "Are you all right?" She turned slowly. Her face was pale, eyes black as voids, and her mouth hung open in a silent scream. Her body jerked toward me in unnatural, twitching motions like a puppet on strings. I slammed the door shut and ran. Back at the desk, I couldn't breathe. My hands shook so badly I couldn't dial my phone. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? The next day, I told Maria. She crossed herself and refused to speak a word. But later that night, she slipped me a newspaper clipping. It was from 1986. Local girl found dead in hotel bathtub, room 313. Her name was Isabel Mendez, age 9. She had gone missing for 2 days. They found her in the bathtub, wrists slit, the door locked from the inside. No signs of forced entry. No one knew how she got in. They said her mother used to stay in that room often with different men. Isabel would be left alone for hours. One day, she just stopped speaking. 2 weeks later, she died. I couldn't sleep after that. I saw her in my dreams, always standing in that corner, head bowed, the doll beside her whispering in my voice. "Come back! Come back!" I asked management to block off the room. They laughed. "Ghost stories help business," one of them said. Then guests began to complain. Those staying in rooms near 313 said they heard a child crying. Some said they woke to find wet footprints in their room. One woman swore a little girl stood at the foot of her bed all night, humming a nursery rhyme with no melody. I started leaving salt lines by the door. It didn't help. Then one night, I made a mistake. A new guy, Rick, was on the late shift. I forgot to warn him. At 2 a.m., I got a call at home. "I saw her," Rick whispered. "She smiled at me." I rushed to the hotel. He had opened the door to room 313. Inside, the room was now completely rotted, black mold crawling up the walls, water dripping from the ceiling, and that same porcelain doll, but now cracked and missing an eye. Rick was gone. No sign of him, not even his shoes. The security footage showed him walking into the room, but no one came out. I quit the next morning. I couldn't take it anymore. They still haven't closed room 313. Sometimes I drive past the hotel and look up at the third floor. The light is always off, but I swear I see her silhouette in the window, standing there, watching, waiting. They told us not to go near the old well behind the farmhouse. Sealed for a reason, my uncle said, patting the crumbling stone edge. Bad things come out of deep places. Of course, we didn't listen. It was the summer my parents sent me to stay with Uncle Dave on his rural property. I was 16, bitter about the countryside, and even more bitter about having no Wi-Fi. My cousin Jenna, 2 years younger and 10 times braver, found a kind of excitement in the isolation that I just couldn't match. The farmhouse was ancient, floors that creaked with every step, wallpaper that peeled like old skin, and barns full of rusted tools and hollow silence. But it was the well that drew us in. About 40 feet behind the house, it sat encircled by broken stones and thick weeds, the cover loosely placed with a large flat rock. Something about it felt wrong, like the air was colder around it. That first night, I had a dream. I was standing by the well, the wind howling. The stone cover had slid off. I heard whispering from below. Not words, just invitation. I leaned over and saw my own reflection in the water, but it was grinning, not with my mouth, but with my eyes. And then hands wet and skeletal reached up and pulled me in. I woke gasping. Over breakfast, Jenna looked pale. She pushed her scrambled eggs around without eating. "You okay?" I asked. She glanced at Uncle Dave, then leaned closer. I had a dream about the well. We didn't tell him. Instead, we did the dumb thing. We waited until late afternoon when he went into town and crept out to the well. The air was dead still, as if the wind refused to blow near it. Jenna shoved the rock aside with surprising ease. It was deeper than we expected. Totally black, with no sound, no water at the bottom, just darkness. We took turns dropping small pebbles in. None of them made a sound. "I dare you to look in," Jenna said. I did. For a moment, there was nothing, just black stone walls spiraling down forever. Then, something moved. I jerked back. "I saw something down there." She peered in next. "It's just your own paranoia." But that night, she changed. I woke around 2 a.m. to the sound of dripping. Jenna stood at the foot of my bed, soaked to the skin, her eyes wide and blank. "Jenna?" I whispered. She didn't answer, just turned and walked away, leaving wet footprints behind. In the morning, she didn't remember a thing. But her hair was damp, and there were puddles by her bed. Uncle Dave started acting weird too. He avoided the back of the house, locked the kitchen door that led toward the well, and muttered to himself when he thought we weren't listening. I caught him praying under his breath one night. That was when we found the journal, tucked away in a drawer in the attic beneath a box of old photographs and rotting letters. It belonged to my great-grandfather, who had lived in the same house. The entries were all shaky and frantic. July 3rd, 1932, the voices started again. "The well is not empty. It watches me now." July 6th, I saw her face again, the one I buried. Her eyes are wrong. They move too much. July 8th, I tried to cover it, but it won't stay closed. I hear her walking at night, wet footsteps, dragging nails. We dropped the journal and ran out of the attic. That night, the house creaked in the wrong ways. Doors opened by themselves. The hallway lights flickered even though the bulbs were new. I stayed up, listening, barely breathing, and then I heard it. A low, gurgling sound. Jenna screamed. I burst into her room. She was gone. The window was wide open, the screen torn. I followed the trail of wet footprints through the hallway, down the stairs, across the kitchen, and out into the dark. They led straight to the well. The rock cover had been pushed aside. I shouted her name, but no sound echoed back, as if the well absorbed it. I picked up a flashlight and lowered it in. The beam disappeared into nothingness, and then I saw her. Jenna. Floating just below the edge, face up, arms out, eyes open. She smiled. Not her real smile, but the one from my dream. Twisted, hungry. She whispered, "Jump." I ran. Uncle Dave found me huddled in the barn at sunrise. He didn't ask anything, just nodded solemnly and said, "It took another." We sealed the well properly that day. Cement, salt, crosses, everything. Jenna was never found. Officially, they said she ran away. But I know better. Sometimes at night, I still hear her voice in the pipes when water runs too long. Sometimes I see wet footprints in the bathroom, even though I live alone. And in my dreams, I always return to the well. And she's always waiting. The mirror in the attic. When my Aunt Elaine died, I inherited her house. We hadn't spoken in years. She was always strange, quiet, cold, obsessed with old books and superstitions. But she left everything to me in her will, including the creaking Victorian house perched alone on the edge of a forgotten town. I had just gone through a messy breakup and needed a change, so I packed up and moved in. The house was exactly as I remembered from childhood visits, full of antique furniture, dusty drapes, and the ever-present scent of lavender and decay. But there was one room I didn't recall ever seeing before: the attic. It was locked. The key turned up inside a copy of the picture of Dorian Gray, tucked between pages 143 and 144. I opened the attic door on my fourth night there. The air was heavy and dry. Old boxes, faded photographs, a rocking chair covered in a white sheet, the usual. But what caught my attention was the mirror. It was tall, ornate, and completely out of place, carved from dark wood covered in symbols I didn't recognize. The glass was clean, too clean. No dust, no smudge, just perfect reflection. Except not quite. The first time I noticed it was when I leaned in. My reflection didn't move exactly in sync. There was the tiniest lag, like a delay in a video call. Subtle, but unmistakable. I laughed it off. Old glass warping light, I thought. That night, I dreamed of the mirror. In the dream, I stood before it, but my reflection was smiling, wide, gleeful, manic, while I remained still. Then it lifted its hand and tapped the glass from the inside. I woke with a start, heart pounding, and the sound of fingernails tapping echoing faintly in the dark. Over the next few days, things changed. I started seeing movement in the corners of the mirror. Nothing direct, just flashes, flickers, as if someone was standing just out of sight. The attic grew colder. I began hearing creaks above me at night, even though no one else lived in the house. Then the mirror started showing things that weren't there. I once glanced at it and saw the attic completely empty. No boxes, no rocking chair, just endless space and my reflection staring back. Another time, it showed me standing behind myself, watching. I covered it with a blanket. It didn't help. The dreams became nightly. The reflection became bolder. In one dream, it spoke. "You're hollow," it said in my voice. "Let me in." I started avoiding the attic, but the feeling followed me through the house. I began catching glimpses of my reflection in places I shouldn't have. In windows, in the black screen of the TV, in puddles of water, and always it was smiling. My phone camera once activated by itself in selfie mode. The screen showed me grinning wide, but I wasn't holding the phone. I decided to destroy the mirror. I went up there, armed with a hammer and every ounce of courage I had. I yanked the blanket off. The mirror was empty. No reflection at all. I leaned closer, unsure. And then it grinned. My reflection appeared again, but it was wearing different clothes, old, tattered. It looked older, paler, eyes sunken. It whispered again, lips barely moving. "You came back." Before I could react, the glass rippled like water, and a hand reached out. I swung the hammer. The glass didn't shatter. Instead, the impact made the whole mirror tremble, and a scream, high-pitched and furious, filled the attic. I dropped the hammer and fled. When I returned the next morning, the mirror was gone. Just gone. No mark on the floor. No scratches. No footprints. The attic looked like no one had been there in years. But the dreams haven't stopped. I see myself, still trapped behind that glass, begging to be let out. I don't look like me anymore. My hair is falling out, my skin gray. Every time I pass a mirror now, I look away. Because one day I know I'll see her again. And this time, she won't be on the other side.